Hello everyone, got a few dirty jokes for you today. So Paddy is planning to marry and asks his family doctor how he could tell if his bride-to-be is still a virgin. His doctor says, "Paddy, all Irish use three things for what we call a do-it-yourself virginity test kit. A small can of red paint, a small can of blue paint, and a shovel." Paddy asks, "And what do I do with these things, doctor?" The doctor replies, "Before you climb into bed on your wedding night, you paint one of your balls red and the other ball blue. If she says, 'That's the strangest pair of balls I ever seen,' you hit her with the shovel." So Ethel was a bit of a demon in her wheelchair and loved to charge around the nursing home, taking corners on one wheel and getting up to maximum speed on the long corridors. Because the poor woman was one sandwich short of a picnic, the other residents tolerated her, and some of them actually joined in. One day, Ethel was speeding up one corridor when a door opened and Cookie Clarence stepped out with his arm outstretched. "Stop!" he shouted in a firm voice. "Have you got a license for that thing?" Ethel fished around in her handbag and pulled out a Kit Kat wrapper and held it up to him. "Okay," he said, and away Ethel sped down the hall. As she took the corner near the TV lounge on one wheel, Weird Harold popped out in front of her and shouted, "Stop! Have you got proof of insurance?" Ethel dug into her handbag, pulled out a drink coaster and held it up to him. Harold nodded and said, "Go on your way." As Ethel neared the final corridor, Crazy Craig stepped out in front of her, butt naked, and holding his you-know-what in his hand. "Oh, good grief," yelled Ethel. "Not that damn breathalyzer test again." So a little boy and a little girl attended the same school and became friends. Every day they would sit together to eat their lunch. They discovered that they both brought chicken sandwiches every day. This went on all through the 4th and 5th grades, until one day he noticed that her sandwich wasn't a chicken sandwich. He said, "Hey, how come you're not eating chicken? Don't you like it anymore?" She said, "I love it, but I have to stop eating it." "Why?" he asked. She pointed to her lap and said, "Because I'm starting to grow little feathers down there." "Let me see," he said. "Okay," and she pulled up her skirt. He looked and said, "That's right. You are. Better not eat any more chicken." He kept eating his chicken sandwiches until one day he brought peanut butter. He said to his friend, "I have to stop eating chicken sandwiches. I'm starting to get feathers down there too." She asked if she could look, so he pulled down his pants for her. She said, "Oh my God, it's too late for you. You've already got the neck and gibbets." So a cowboy appeared before St. Peter at the pearly gates. "Have you ever done anything of particular merit?" St. Peter asked. "Well, I can think of one thing," the cowboy offered. "On a trip to the Black Hills out in South Dakota, I came upon a gang of bikers who were threatening a young woman. I directed them to leave her alone, but they wouldn't listen. So I approached the largest and most tattooed biker and smacked him in the face. Kicked his bike over, ripped out his nose ring, and threw it on the ground. I yelled, 'Now, back off, or I'll kick the crap out of all of you.' St. Peter was impressed and asked, 'When did this happen?' The cowboy looked at his watch and said, 'About 2 minutes ago.' So two friends, a blonde and a redhead, are walking down the street and pass a flower shop where the redhead sees her boyfriend buying her flowers. The redhead sighs and says, 'Oh crap, my boyfriend buying me flowers again.' The blonde looks quizzically at her and says, 'You don't like getting flowers from your boyfriend?' The redhead replies, 'I love getting flowers, but he always has expectations after giving me flowers, and I just don't feel like spending the next 3 days on my back with my legs in the air.' The blonde says, "Don't you have a vase?" So, a blonde pushes her BMW into a gas station. She tells the mechanic it died. After he works on it for a few minutes, it is idling smoothly. She says, "What's the story?" He replies, "Just crap in the carburetor." She asks, "How often do I have to do that?" So a nurse was on duty in the emergency room when a young woman with purple hair styled into a punk rocker mohawk, sporting a variety of tattoos, and wearing strange clothing, entered. It was quickly determined that the patient had acute appendicitis, so she was scheduled for immediate surgery. When she was completely disrobed on the operating table, the staff noticed that her pubic hair had been dyed green, and above it there was a tattoo that read, "Keep off the grass." Once the surgery was completed, the surgeon wrote a short note on the patient's dressing which said, "Sorry, had to mow the lawn." So Dave and Jim were a couple of drinking buddies who worked as aircraft mechanics in Melbourne. One day the airport was fogged in, and they were stuck in the hangar with nothing to do. Dave said, "Man, I wish we had something to drink." Jim says, "Me too, you know. I've heard you can drink jet fuel and get a buzz. You wanna try it?" So they pour themselves a couple of glasses of high-octane booze and get completely smashed. The next morning, Dave wakes up and is surprised at how good he feels. In fact, he feels great. No hangover, no bad side effects, nothing. Then the phone rings. It's Jim. Jim says, "Hey, how do you feel this morning?" Dave says, "I feel great. How about you?" Jim says, "I feel great too. You don't have a hangover." Dave says, "No, that jet fuel is great stuff. No hangover, nothing. We should do this more often." "Yeah, well, there's just one thing." "What's that? Have you farted yet?" "No." "Well, don't, because I'm in India." So 2 women were playing golf. One teed off and watched in horror as her ball headed directly toward a foursome of men playing the next hole. The ball hit one of the men. He immediately clasped his hands together at his groin, fell to the ground, and proceeded to roll around in agony. The woman rushed down to the man and immediately began to apologize. "Please, allow me to help. I'm a physical therapist, and I know I could relieve your pain if you'd allow me." She told him, "Oh, no, I'll be all right once I get to hospital." The man replied. He was in obvious agony, lying in the fetal position, still clasping his hands between his legs. At her persistence, however, he finally allowed her to help. She gently took his hands away and laid them to the side, loosened his pants, and put her hands inside. She administered the most tender and artful massage for several long minutes until he exploded in his pants. She smiled shyly and asked, "How does that feel?" "Feels great, but I still think my thumb's broken." So, a guy goes into a doctor's office. Doctor, I keep thinking I'm a moth. Can you help me?" Doc says, "Sorry, mate. I'm not a psychiatrist. What brought you to me?" "Well," the guy replies, "your light was on." So Paddy Murphy was sent on his way to heaven. Upon his arrival, a concerned St. Peter met Paddy at the pearly gates. "I'm sorry, Paddy," St. Peter said, "but heaven is suffering from an overload of goodly souls, and we have been forced to put up an entrance exam for new arrivals to ease the burden of heavenly arrivals." "That's all right," said Paddy. "What does the entrance exam consist of?" "Just 3 questions," said St. Peter. "Which are?" asked Paddy. "The first," said St. Peter, is which 2 days of the week start with the letter T. The second is how many seconds are there in a year. The third is what was the name of the swagman in Waltzing Matilda. Now, said St. Peter, go away and think about those questions, and when I call upon you, I shall expect you to have those answers for me. So Paddy went away and gave those 3 questions some considerable thought. The following morning, St. Peter called upon Paddy and asked if he had considered the questions, to which Paddy replied, I have. Well then, said St. Peter, which 2 days of the week start with the letter T. Paddy said, today and tomorrow. St. Peter pondered this answer for some time and decided that indeed the answer can be applied to the question. Well, then, Paddy, could I have your answer to the second of the 3 questions? St. Peter went on, how many seconds are there in a year? Paddy replied, just 12. Only 12? Exclaimed St. Peter. How did you arrive at that figure, Paddy? Easy, said Paddy. There's the 2nd of January, the 2nd of February, right through to the 2nd of December, giving a total of 12 seconds. St. Peter looked at Paddy and said, I need some time to consider your answer before I can give you a decision. And he walked away shaking his head. A short time later, St. Peter returned to Paddy. I'll allow the answer to stand, Paddy, but you need to get the 3rd and final question absolutely correct to be allowed into heaven. Now, Paddy, can you tell me the answer to the name of the swagman in Waltzing Matilda? Paddy replied, of the 3 questions, I found this the easiest to answer. Really? Exclaimed St. Peter. And what is the answer, Paddy? It's Andy, said Paddy. Andy, exclaimed St. Peter. Yes, Andy, said Paddy. This totally floored St. Peter, and he paced this way and that, deliberating the answer. Finally, he could not stand the suspense any longer, and turning to Paddy, asked Paddy, how in God's name did you arrive at that answer? Easy, said Paddy. Andy sat, Andy watched, Andy waited till his billy boiled. And so, Paddy entered heaven.